Somewhere beneath a mountain that still smokes today, something enormous is breathing, not dead, just barely contained. Almost 2,700 years ago, the poet Hesiod tried to describe the thing that terrified even the king of the gods. He wrote it plainly. Up from its shoulders grew 100 snake heads, 100 breathing fire, screaming with the voice of every animal on earth, all at once. That's not a bedtime story. That's the one time the entire order of the universe nearly collapsed. And by the end of this list, you're going to meet that creature properly. But we have to earn it first. Before the monster that almost dethroned Zeus, there are 9 others waiting, creatures that devoured heroes, drowned sailors, and quietly became the blueprint for half the monsters still haunting our movies and games. This is the 10 most dangerous monsters ancient Greece ever imagined, ranked not by fame, but by how hard they were to kill, how many died trying, and how much raw chaos each one was built to represent. Let's start at the bottom.
Not pigeons, war machines with feathers, a flock sacred to Ares, god of war, nesting by the thousands around a lake in Arcadia. Their feathers were bronze, sharp enough to launch like arrows. Even their droppings were said to poison the ground beneath them. Heracles couldn't outfight a flock that size in a marsh too thick to wade through, so he didn't try. Athena handed him a pair of bronze rattles, forged by Hephaestus. He climbed a nearby ridge and made a noise so unbearable that the birds burst into the sky in one panicked cloud, and that was all the opening he needed to bring them down with his bow. Here's what most retellings leave out. These birds turn up again later, terrorizing the Argonauts on an entirely different island. Some dangers, the Greeks seem to understand, don't stay defeated, they just relocate.
This one starts with a king's mistake, not a monstrous cruelty. King Minos of Crete once promised a magnificent bull to Poseidon, then decided at the last moment to keep it for himself. Poseidon's punishment was precise and merciless. He made Minos' own wife fall into an unnatural passion for that same bull. What was born from that union was Asterion, a child with a human body and a bull's head, growing hungrier with every year that passed. Minos didn't kill him, he hid him inside a labyrinth so intricately built by the craftsman Daedalus that nothing placed within it could ever find its way back out. Then, every 9 years, he fed the creature a tribute of 14 young Athenians. That's what makes this monster genuinely dangerous, not just the creature itself, but the architecture built around it. You weren't fighting a bull-headed man, you were fighting a maze engineered so that you would die lost long before you ever got devoured. It took Theseus, a spool of thread, and a princess named Ariadne, willing to betray her own father for a stranger, to finally end it. Here, the danger stops being physical. Picture a lion's body, an eagle's wings, and a woman's face, perched on a cliff outside the city of Thebes. She doesn't hunt you with claws. She hunts you with a question. Answer her riddle correctly, and you live. Get it wrong, and, by most accounts, almost everyone did, and she kills you on the spot. The road outside Thebes was said to be littered with the bones of travelers who thought they were clever enough. That's what earns her a spot this high on the list. She doesn't just kill you, she humiliates you first, turning your own intelligence into the weapon that ends you. When a young exile named Oedipus finally solved her riddle, the answer, simply, was a human being, crawling in infancy, walking in adulthood, leaning on a cane in old age. The Sphinx was so undone by the defeat that, by most accounts, she destroyed herself. Which raises a question the Greeks seemed genuinely fascinated by. What does it mean when the only way to beat a monster is to outthink her, and the answer to her riddle turns out to be you? Number 7 is really two monsters, because in Greek mythology, they always arrive as a pair. Picture a strait so narrow a ship can barely pass through, with death waiting on both sides. On one shore, Scylla, 6 heads on long serpentine necks, each mouth lined with 3 rows of teeth, able to snatch 6 sailors off a deck in a single strike. On the other, Charybdis, not a creature you could fight at all, but a living whirlpool, swallowing the entire sea 3 times a day and dragging anything nearby down with it. This is where we get the phrase, caught between Scylla and Charybdis, trapped between 2 dangers, with no direction that doesn't cost you something. When Odysseus sailed through, the sorceress Circe gave him an impossible choice in advance. Either hug Scylla's side and lose a handful of men, or risk Charybdis and lose the entire ship. He chose to lose 6 men on purpose. That wasn't an accident in the story. That was the whole point of it. Some dangers in Greek mythology weren't obstacles you defeated. They were math problems where the only victory available to you was choosing what you were willing to lose. On paper, this one sounds almost simple. It's just a lion. Except its golden hide couldn't be pierced by any weapon on Earth. Heracles learned that on his very first labor, when his arrows bounced off its skin as if they'd struck solid bronze. So, he cornered it inside its own cave, dropped his weapons entirely, and strangled it with his bare hands. Then came the part almost nobody expects. Afterward, he couldn't skin it. Not with a blade, not with a sharpened stone. Nothing could cut that hide from the outside. According to the mythographer Apollodorus, it was Athena who gave him the answer. The only thing sharp enough to cut the Nemean lion's skin was the lion's own claw. Heracles wore that pelt for the rest of his life. It's the golden cloak and lion's head hood you see draped over him in nearly every piece of ancient art that followed him, meaning the very first monster he ever killed became the armor that carried him through every monster still to come. Number 5. And here's where the sources genuinely disagree, in a way that changes the entire meaning of the story. Medusa was one of 3 Gorgon sisters, but she alone was mortal. Anyone who met her eyes turned to stone on the spot. Her lair was said to be ringed with the stone bodies of everyone who'd looked at her before. In Hesion's version, the oldest we have, she was simply born a monster, one more child in a family of monsters. Centuries later, the Roman poet Ovid tells a different story, that she was once a beautiful priestess in Athena's temple, assaulted there by Poseidon, and that Athena's punishment fell not on him, but on her.
Most modern retellings follow Ovid because it's the more devastating version, though that story was added roughly 700 years after the monster first appeared in writing. Perseus killed her regardless, armed with gifts from 4 gods, a cap of invisibility, winged sandals, a shield to view her only as a reflection, and a blade sharp enough to take her head in one strike. He beheaded her while she slept, and from her neck sprang 2 children she'd been carrying by Poseidon, the winged horse Pegasus and a giant named Chrysaor. Even dead, she stayed dangerous both ways, her blood from one side a fatal poison, from the other, reportedly able to raise the dead. Athena mounted the severed head on her own shield, turning the most dangerous gaze in Greek mythology into the thing that protected a goddess. Number 4, and it starts with the horse that was just born. Pegasus didn't stay riderless long. The hero Bellerophon tamed him with a golden bridle from Athena, and together they hunted the Chimera, a creature so unnatural ancient artists barely agreed on how to draw it. A lion's body and head, a goat's head growing straight from its back, and a live serpent for a tail, all 3 mouths breathing fire at once. Every hero who'd gotten close before had simply burned, so Bellerophon didn't. He and Pegasus stayed airborne, out of reach of the flames, until he tried something almost absurd, fixing a lump of raw lead to his spear and driving it into the Chimera's fire-breathing mouth. Its own flames melted the lead inside its throat, and it choked to death on its own weapon. This is where the modern word comes from. A chimera is still what we call anything built from parts never meant to go together. Some ancient writers had a quieter theory too, that it was really a mountain in Lycia breathing fire from vents in 3 different spots, a volcano wearing a monster's face, a trick this list is about to use one final time. Number 3, and I need to correct something almost everyone gets wrong about his job. Cerberus didn't keep the living out of the underworld, he kept the dead from leaving, fawning on anyone walking in, devouring anyone who tried walking back out. And the 3 heads you're picturing? That number didn't exist yet when he first appears in writing. Hesiod, our earliest source, gave him 50 heads. Pindar later doubled that to 100. The tidy 3-headed version only became standard centuries afterward, likely, historians suspect, because 50 snarling heads are hard to fit on a painted vase. Heracles fetched him as his 12th and final labor, wrestling him into submission essentially unarmed with Hades and Persephone's permission. He wasn't the only one who got past Cerberus, though. Orpheus once did it with nothing but music, playing him into a daze. And in Roman myth, a priestess called the Sibyl simply drugged him with a honeyed cake, which is where we still get the phrase a sop to Cerberus, a small bribe to quiet something dangerous. Number 2, and this is the monster whose danger genuinely outlived it. The Hydra was a serpent the size of a small house in the poison swamps of Lerna. Its defining trait wasn't the heads themselves. Accounts range from 6 to 9 to 50 depending on the poet. It was what happened when you cut one off. 2 grew back. Every wound multiplied the problem, and its breath alone was said to be toxic enough to kill. Hercules realized his sword would lose this fight by simple arithmetic, so his nephew Iolaus cauterized every neck the instant Hercules opened it, burning each stump shut before new heads could form. Hera even sent a giant to Crab to distract him mid-battle. He crushed it underfoot without slowing down. When only the immortal head remained, he severed it and buried it still alive under a boulder. Then he did something that would haunt him for life. He dipped his arrows in the Hydra's poisoned blood, turning every future shot into an instant kill. Years later, a centaur named Nessus attacked his wife, and Hercules brought him down with one of those arrows. Dying, Nessus lied to her, claiming his blood was a charm to keep her husband faithful forever. Fearing she was losing him, she later soaked a tunic in that same blood, the Hydra's poison still inside it,
and gave it to him to wear. It killed him in agony. The Hydra didn't die with Hercules in that swamp. It waited decades inside his own weapon and finished the job itself. Number 1. Back to that mountain from the beginning of this list. Typhon was the last child Gaia, the earth herself, ever bore. Created, Hesiod says, out of fury that Zeus had just imprisoned her other children, the Titans, and she needed something strong enough to end his new order before it finished forming. What she made had 100 serpent heads on one set of shoulders, fire flashing from every eye, each head screaming a different voice at once. Words a god could understand, then a bull's bellow, a lion's roar, 100 dogs barking. He was so vast his head brushed the stars while his hands reached the eastern and western edges of the world. His mate was Echidna, half woman, half serpent, the ancient sources called the mother of monsters. Between them, they produced nearly every creature on this list: the Hydra, Cerberus, the Chimera, by some accounts even the Nemean lion and the Sphinx. Almost everything you've heard tonight traces back to this one pairing. The earliest account says Zeus struck him down fast with the thunderbolt. A later version by the mythographer Apollodorus is far more unsettling. Typhon won the first encounter, cutting the sinews from Zeus's hands and feet and leaving the king of the gods helpless in a cave, unable to move a muscle, until Hermes and the god Pan stole those sinews back in secret and restored his strength. Only then did Zeus return, riding a chariot of winged horses, throwing everything he had, driving Typhon across the entire sea to Sicily and ending it the only way left to him, picking up a mountain and dropping it on top of him. That mountain was Etna. The Greeks believe things born from the earth and the underworld don't simply die, so every tremor since, every plume of smoke was Typhon, still breathing beneath it, still testing the one thing that ever managed to hold him down. Hesiod, writing this nearly 2,700 years ago, said it plainly. Without Zeus's quick action, Typhon would have gone on to rule over gods and mortals alike. That's the detail worth sitting with. Every other monster on this list was dangerous to heroes, to sailors, to travelers on a lonely road. Typhon was dangerous to the entire idea of order itself, the only being in Greek mythology who came within a single fight of ruling the universe instead of Zeus. So there they are, the 10 most dangerous monsters the Greeks ever dared to imagine. If there's one thread underneath all 10, it's this. The Greeks weren't really afraid of teeth and claws. They were afraid of what each monster represented. Poison that reaches you decades later, a guardian nobody can agree on, a father of monsters so vast a mountain still hasn't stopped shaking 27 centuries later. If stories like this are your thing, subscribing means you won't miss the next one. I'd genuinely like to know, which of these 10 would you least want to run into, and is there a ranking of your own you'd argue for instead? Put it in the comments. I read every one, and the disagreements are usually the most interesting part. And if this video earned it, a like helps put this kind of storytelling in front of more people who'd enjoy it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.